Calusa people, one of the most unique and powerful Native American cultures in Florida's history. These were not your typical farmers or hunters. The Calusa thrived on the bounty of the ocean, building a rich and complex society that stood out from their neighbors. Imagine a world where the sea, not the soil, provided everything a community needed. This was the world of the Calusa. The Calusa were masters of the southwest Florida coast, stretching their influence from Charlotte Harbor all the way down to Cape Sable, and sometimes even reaching the Florida Keys. They lived in what we now call Charlotte, Lee, and Collier counties, in a region teeming with rivers, estuaries, and marine life. And get this, they didn't rely on farming at all. Instead, they built their lives around fishing, gathering everything they needed from the sea. Some estimates suggest their population at the time of European contact ranged from 10,000 to possibly much more, making them one of the densest populations in South Florida. But the Calusa weren't just about survival, they were about power. Their influence extended far beyond their territory, controlling other tribes in southern Florida, like the Miami near Lake Okeechobee, and the Tequesta along the southeastern coast. The Calusa were the leaders of a vast network, using alliances and dominance to shape the region. Unfortunately, their world changed forever when Europeans arrived in the 16th and 17th centuries. Diseases and conflicts brought by the Spanish led to their eventual decline and disappearance. Now what really set the Calusa apart was their rich culture and fierce spirit. In fact, their name, Calusa, is thought to mean fierce people. Early European accounts describe them as proud and formidable, with a complex social structure led by a paramount chief, military leaders, and priests. These rulers lived on Mound Key, a stunning island in present-day Estero, Florida, built entirely from shells and sand. One Spanish account even mentioned a chief's house big enough to hold 2,000 people. Can you imagine? What's truly fascinating is how long the Calusa had been in Florida. Archaeological evidence suggests their ancestors lived there for thousands of years. By around 500 BC, the Calusa's unique identity began to emerge, centered around fishing, gathering shellfish, and building massive shell mounds that still stand today as a testament to their ingenuity. Over time, they developed a distinct pottery style, and their society became increasingly sophisticated, with clear social classes and elaborate traditions. And now let's dive deeper into the lives of the Calusa and what made their culture so distinct. When it came to their diet, the Calusa relied heavily on the bounty of the waters surrounding them. Their meals were dominated by fish like pinfish, pigfish, and hardhead catfish, along with other sea creatures such as sharks, rays, mollusks, and even sea turtles. Occasionally, they also hunted land animals and birds, but the heart of their sustenance came from the sea. Interestingly, when the Spanish explorer Pedro Menéndez de Avilés visited them in 1566, the Calusa presented only fish and oysters as food, a clear nod to their dependence on aquatic resources. Archaeological findings confirm this, showing that fish and shellfish provided over 90% of their dietary energy at coastal sites. However, inland, their diet leaned more toward land-based animals like deer. Some historians have speculated that the Calusa might have grown crops like maize or kountey, but the evidence remains thin. In fact, the Calusa themselves dismissed the Spanish offers of agricultural tools, claiming they didn't need them. They were more inclined to gather wild plants such as acorns, wild papaya, chili peppers, and prickly pears. Gourds, cultivated by the Calusa, served as practical tools rather than food, used as floats for fishing nets or scoops. Speaking of tools, the Calusa were masterful fishers, crafting their nets with precision, using palm fiber cords, and ensuring each mesh size suited the type of fish they aimed to catch. They also constructed fish traps, weirs, and corrals to optimize their harvest. Shells and bones were their go-to materials for making tools, with mollusk shells serving as hammers, scrapers, and engravers, while shark teeth became sharp cutting implements. Their artistry extended to wooden items too, including carved masks and plaques, some of which were vibrantly painted. Their homes were just as impressive. The Calusa lived in large communal dwellings, some of which were massive two-story structures. The chief's house, described during Menendez's visit, was so spacious it could comfortably host thousands. These buildings, often perched on earthen mounds, not only served as living spaces, but were central hubs for ceremonies and governance. The Calusa adorned themselves modestly, with men wearing deerskin breechcloths and women likely donning skirts made from Spanish moss. Body painting was a common practice among them, though they didn't engage in tattooing. Some chiefs and nobles wore jewelry, pearls, beads, and gold ornaments, showcasing their status. Now, let's talk about their spiritual beliefs and customs. The Calusa saw the world as being governed by three powerful beings, and believed that humans had three distinct souls, represented by their shadow, reflection, and the pupil of their eye. After death, these souls transitioned into animals, a belief that shaped their rituals and burial practices. They buried their dead in mounds, and often held sacred ceremonies atop these sites. Priests, adorned in ceremonial masks, played a key role in their religious practices, conducting processions and leading rituals. What's remarkable is how fiercely the Calusa resisted European influence, holding fast to their beliefs and traditions despite Spanish attempts to convert them. The Spanish missionaries found it particularly difficult to sway the Calusa nobility, whose power was deeply intertwined with their spiritual roles. But like many Native American tribes, the Calusa couldn't escape the devastating impact of European contact. Diseases brought by the Spanish, coupled with attacks from other tribes armed by European settlers, decimated their population. By the early 18th century, the tribe had largely vanished, with some survivors possibly absorbed into other groups or relocated to Cuba.